Hey, so I am Shelby from Simple Homemaker Meals. If you follow me, you know who I am. If you don't, I'm just a homemaker that really loves cooking and all things getting back to lost skills. But today I wanted to show y'all how to make sourdough bread. So this is my starter. I have a nice active starter. It's been going strong probably for about 6 months or so, but I did a reel a couple weeks ago on Instagram and about making a starter with cups, and it showed a lot of people showed a lot of interest in sourdough making and how there's so much unknown about it. And I was like that as well. I started sourdough making about a year and a half ago, and I didn't know anything. I had never made bread at all before. But I just started and I failed a lot. I think I made about 8 loaves that were terrible. I would make them and I'd happily tell my husband that, hey, I think I did it, and no, it was a fail. It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about bread making. But what is different from the way I make bread, sourdough, is I don't do scales, and that in the sourdough world, if you've been around looking at it, that is kind of abnormal. So I don't use any scales. I try to do as basic as I can, and that's what I want to show you. So my sourdough starter, I'll just tell you, I do a 2-to-1 ratio. I do 1 cup flour and 1/2 cup of water. That is how I feed my starter. And feeding and discarding is feeding flour and water. Discarding is throwing it away. And when you discard, you can throw it in the trash, you can give it to somebody else, you can use it in another recipe, you can use it in pancakes and all kinds of things. So you don't just have to throw it away per se. But to get your active starter, it does take a few days and a few weeks really to get a nice thriving starter. That is strong, and that's what you want. You want one that will raise your bread great and give you that nice sourdough flavor that people love sourdough. So 1 cup flour, 1/2 cup of water is the ratio how I feed it. And it's really important that you level off your flour correctly. You can use a leveler, or you can sift your flour, whatever you're comfortable with, but flour packs down. So you might think you are using 1 cup, but you're actually using 1.5 cups or less or more than what you really are. So be sure you do that. And then when I feed it, I just use a regular measuring cup and feed it. And they do say filtered water, but I know like spring water and stuff will work too. The biggest concern with the sourdough is heavily chlorinated water. So which, you know, all city water is chlorinated, so it's hard to get past that. So, oops, gotta get my coffee in. But anyway, so 1 cup flour, 1/2 cup water. How you're gonna do this to get your starter is you feed it, okay, you add your cup of flour and 1/2 cup of water, mix it up really good. It should be a thick pancake-like mix. It shouldn't just be super runny, but you want it kind of thick, but not overly thick where it's just like, oh, I can't steer that. So on day 1, you feed and mix. Day 2, you discard half and then feed and mix again, refeed and mix it again. Day 3, you're not gonna do anything. You're just gonna let it sit, okay? So let it sit. Day 4, feed and discard, or discard and refeed, mix. And then you go from there, feeding every other day or so. And how to know your starter is active, it's gonna have a nice bubbly look. I hope y'all can see that. But it's gonna be bubbly and it rises. So your starter's gonna get bigger. Some people do, like, we'll put a rubber band or mark it and then show how much it rises. You can do that if you want. It's completely up to you. But sourdough really isn't that hard. It is about learning though. So if you do fail, that's okay, because you can learn the feel of bread. That's what taught me a lot. So when I make bread, I can tell just by the feel of it how much water, how much flour it needs or has too much. You start to learn this. Really sticky dough is good sometimes. It's hydrated well, but it's hard to shape. And if it's too sticky, it might not rise. So you'll learn that as you make it more and more. But this video isn't necessarily about teaching you how to do a starter. It's about teaching you how to do a loaf. So if it didn't seem like, okay, I still don't get the starter thing, I do have a printable for sale. There is a link on my Instagram where you can get a more detailed schedule and recipe how to do that. But I probably will do a video again about making a starter. There is that short reel on my Instagram, but some complain that it wasn't detailed enough. But some others complain that they needed a recipe. So that's why I'm here today. I'm going to show you my method for making sourdough. And I will also tell you a few places what taught me. So I am the type of person that I learn myself. Like if I want to know something, I'm going to find out. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to Google, I'm going to read, I'm going to watch YouTube videos. I'm going to figure it out, okay? And that's what sourdough I did. But with sourdough, it's limited information with cups. And I was so sad, I don't even own a kitchen scale. But I didn't want to have to buy something else so I could make this bread. I'm frugal, I'm cheap, whatever. I just didn't want to do that. There had to be another way. Well, I got the Nourishing Traditions cookbook. Let me share that for you. Let me grab it out of my cabinet. Here it is. It's by Sally Fallon. She has some other books, but this is the one I have. It's got a lot of great recipes and great notes on just traditional cooking, getting back to your roots of ancestral cooking from broths to all kinds of stuff. But the sourdough recipe in here, now the recipe that's in here, it makes lots of loaves. I think like 8 or 10 loaves. I didn't need that much. But I looked at it and I did the math. I figured it out. And I made my starter from the recipe that's in here, and the ratios and so forth. So that's how I learned. And another great resource is King Arthur. They're online. You just have to Google it and look up recipes. I have used their cinnamon roll sourdough recipe, and I've actually adapted it to my own now because I don't use the wheat and active yeast in it. So two great resources if you're wanting to find more about sourdough making. So that's that. Really recommend that. But we are going to make sourdough bread with cups, no grams or sourdough scale. So I have a cup and a half of water here, and this recipe is right from King Arthur. I didn't, make it myself, but it's from King Arthur, so it's there to look at, and I will share in the description of this video the exact measurements. But cup and a half of water, and you stir it in here. And here in a second, I'm going to switch it over, and you can see what I'm doing, working with my hands and all that. And then we have our salt. Here it is. It's a teaspoon and a half of salt. So. And that. Okay. But like I said, sourdough making, it's as easy and as hard as you want to make it. And then now we have our sourdough starter. Like I said, I'm not weighing this, so if you're like a sourdough guru that does courses or whatever, and you're seeing this, you're like, oh, if I'm not gonna do it, that's okay. I have had many successful loaves, a successful starter. This is an easy way to learn. And if you want to do scales, go ahead. But now I'm adding my starter. And you can do it like this, whatever you're comfortable with. I try not to do it like this because the starter gets stuck to the sides. And you don't have to have something this big. Thankfully, I had a jar this big, so that's what I went to. I did use a mason jar, but it exploded. Well, not totally exploded, but I woke up one morning, my sourdough starter was all over the counter, everywhere. So, big mess. And this prevents the mess. But then if you're wondering about covering your sourdough starter, I use a coffee filter. and I do a rubber band around it. And you can store on your counter, cabinet, wherever, or in the fridge. If you don't make sourdough or don't plan on making it that often, do recommend putting it in your fridge because it makes it to where you do not have to feed it as much. So, a nice bubbly starter. It's going to take a while, but I'm kind of showing you the process. And then when I'm done, you'll actually get to see me feed. And so this right now, what I'm doing to my starter, I'm discarding the starter. And a little more. So it's a little over a cup, but it's okay. Okay, and I'm going to add it to this in a second. We're going to change the direction, and you can see. And when you do make a recipe, you want to leave some of your mature sourdough starter. You don't want to use it all because you want that base to help continue on. So keep that in mind as well. So that is that. Okay, and then I use I think these are called Danish whisk, but I really recommend, I mean, you can also use a mixer, but I do most of my bread making from hand because I like the feel of it. But we're going to switch the look, and you can see look this way. So okay, so I hope you can see my mix here. Good. Remember, I've already added the water, salt, and starter. So I'm gonna mix it. I've seen people do this by hand. You can mix it by hand, but you're gonna mix it. And if you've ever done yeast bread, you know you mix the yeast and water and sugar like this. So bubbling, that's great. And this recipe from King Arthur calls for 5 cups of flour. And I'll show you. And I use unbleached all-purpose flour. I do like King Arthur. Unfortunately, sometimes I can't afford it. It's not my budget anyway, but the Walmart brand unbleached works well. And I have leveled. There's a little dip, that's okay. I'll pack that in there. I'm actually going to do 4 cups, and then I'm going to mix. Because I don't want my dough too dense. I'm probably have to open another bag of flour. Let's see. Okay. So that is that. And we're going to begin working up around the sides. Okay, it's forming now. And it's going to get, when you do this, it's going to get harder to mix. Like so. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using my hands. I'm not going to put it on my surface just yet. I'm going to do here, and this is why I didn't do a full 5 cups, because I'm not measuring this. But I'm sprinkling it on. I know it's going to need more. And, okay, that's some good, really good. Okay, now we're going to do what is called the stretch and fold. Okay. And this recipe will make 2 loaves or 1 big loaf. It's already connecting pretty great. So And I'll knead it up, work it well. It's a little sticky, that's okay. So I'll add a little flour here and there. Just don't want it too dense. See that break? I'm gonna keep working it. We want it to build tension and be This dough is perfect though, consistency and feel. It's not too sticky, not too dense. It's getting there. Bread making is an art. It takes lots of practice to learn the feel of breads, and I'm still a newbie. Like I said, I've been doing this for a year, so I'm not as seasoned as some, but I'm sharing to you what has worked for me and giving myself some successful loaves. Now, the thing to consider though is, so after you're done with this, you're still not getting bread for a few hours. My sourdough typically takes 8 to 12 hours to rise. So when I'm done with this, I probably won't be baking this loaf until later tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. We'll see how it rises through the day, but big possibility it might take longer to rise. It will depend on where you live, I think altitudes and all that crazy stuff, but and the temperature outside. So if it's really warm in your house, it won't take as long to rise. If it's really cold, it's going to take a little longer. If you have a wood stove, plopping this on your wood stove would be great. If you're using your oven, you can plop it on the oven, not in the oven, but on your stove top. And so our loaf here, and as you can see, as I continue on this, it's becoming easier and easier to stretch and fold. Okay. So, still stretching and folding. See that rip? We don't want that. But we're getting pretty great here. I'm gonna start rounding out with a little work. As far as the flour adding, like I said, I did 4 cups, and then I'd grab here and there, adding a little more. It's turning out really great. See, I don't want that. I need it to form nice. And one more. This will probably take 8 to 10 minutes to knead and stretch. Now, if you've never done this, it might take longer just because you're learning it. That's okay. It's a process. You're gonna learn, but you're gonna keep doing that, stretching, folding, and kneading. Stretching, folding, and kneading. And once I get mine down to how it should be, I'll show you how it should be. And well, I can't show you how it feels, but I'll show you what it looks like. It's getting there. Okay, so we have our dough now, and it's finally to a point that I like. It's doing well. Now we are going to do the first rise. Like I said, it may take 6 to 12 hours. I've heard some people say, you know, it can take up to 18 hours. I personally haven't done it that long, but it might. but it's going to double in size. I'm going to show you how to do that, but like this. And then, so I'm going to do a last stretch and fold like that. And like that. That one ripped a bit, but I'm going to tell you something else that I'm going to do here. Like that. And shape it up into a nice ball. So this next part, like I said, is the first rise. Now, here in about 4 hours, this is optional, but I am going to stretch and fold my bread again, depending on how much it's rose. I mean, if it rises tremendously in 4 hours, then I'll probably bake it in probably by dinner time. But if it's not rising that fast, I'm going to perform a stretch and fold again. And the stick in, that's perfectly okay. Because you don't want too dense. You don't want it too underly hydrated. But now we will, and some people do this, some people don't, but I'm going to stick it back into the bowl I mixed it in, cover it with a dish towel, and let it sit somewhere warm, like I said, for a few hours. And then we'll do scoring and the rest of that. Like I said, I'm going to show you, and I'm also going to show you how to feed your starter. So set that to the side. I'll put my starter over here, and I might have to open another bag of flour. I don't know. We will see. Nope. Yeah, just enough. Isn't that something? So I'm gonna feed my starter 1 cup, half a cup of water. Okay. Then I'm going to give it a nice mix. I hope you can see that well. And I did have a person ask, a lady, I think, do you wash the jar? Do you change it out? I do periodically. It's up to you, but yeah. Every so often I'll dump it into a clean jar, clean this one, and rotate them out. But give it a good mix. And now I have discarded and refed my starter. It's that easy. And so that is that part. We'll come back and I'll show you scoring and shaping your bread. But I hope that this first segment has really helped you with learning the sourdough. Maybe put some things off. If you notice, I use metal spoons. Some people say you can't. I've used them, have not seen any problems. I use glass, stainless steel. So that's that. But we will come back and I'll show you a little more. Thank you. Okay, so we're back from the first rise, and this is what we've got. So it's rose a bit. It's got a really great texture. And I am ready to get this shaped up and ready to bake. So a couple things to consider too. I'm going to do another stretch and fold, but so you may see people baking in a Dutch oven. You totally can, but you don't have to. That's not the only way to bake it. You can bake it in a bread pan. You can make regular loaves. You can bake on a baking sheet. That's actually how I bake a lot of mine. So you can use a Dutch oven. It's completely up to you. But this is what I have so far. I'm going to get it nice and shaped. But I'm performing a few more stretch and folds. Just to make sure. And the little baby is up from her nap, so and my son is with the grandparents. So I have a little bit of quiet time. But form it. If you're doing it in this type of loaf, form it to bread. And I'm adding a little more flour. And this round, I'm actually going to score it as well. So, there she is. And I'm not a professional scorer, so I'm not going to do nothing crazy, but this is a bread lame. It's just a razor blade. You can use a razor blade, sharp knife, whatever you got. So that is that. And now we will do its second rise. But you see how that opens up? It's awesome. What we want to see. So that's that. This will make a big loaf like this, or one big bread loaf as well. Or I think it probably would make two kind of small loaves and one big loaf of bread. I've never personally tried this recipe with making traditional bread loaves. I've only made them. I know there's a name for this, but I can't think of it. So if you're watching this, you're like, oh, she's not a sourdough expert. I am not. This is my method of sourdough making. It works. It's pretty basic, and it has helped me learn it and do it successfully. So I'm going to let it rise a second time. That'll be that. All right, so I have it on this. Like I said, you can use a Dutch oven, you can use a baking pan, whatever you got to bake on, you can use it. And I'm going to bake it at 425 for about 20-30 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. Let's see, oh, it will take about 45 minutes to an hour for the second rise. So right now she's doing the second rise. And I also want to kind of go over with you this too. Some people score it after it rises for the second rise. You can do either or. I do it before the second rise. So it's up to you how you want to do that. But for this one, we scored it before the second rise. So she's on the second rise. You can cover it if you want. I typically don't. But yeah, so we're gonna bake it at 425 after about an hour. So it is 3:48, or no, it's 2:48 where I'm at, sorry. 2:48, so about 4 o'clock I'm gonna come and I'm gonna bake it, and it should be ready by dinner time. So, but yeah, that's it. You can do it how you want to as far as that shaping. I'm sorry. As far as shaping, you can do it how you want. I'm not a sourdough expert, so if you're watching this and you're like, she is terrible, this is just a method that I've found that actually works. You can take it and adapt it, like I've adapted the King Arthur and the Nourishing Traditions methods and kind of make it your own, but this was a way that I learned, and hopefully you can learn too from it. So if you fail, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, try again. Just keep trying. Our generation, well, the newer generations, if it's not easy, people don't want it, but I'm telling you, the hard stuff is where it's at, because once you learn to do something that's hard and you reap that reward, there's no going back. So like growing your food, you know, it takes forever to till it up, to get it in, weed it and all this, but once you get that first homegrown cucumber, you can't go back. So same with bread. And my baby is talking. But yeah, once you start baking your own bread, you can't go back. I started with yeast, started with sourdough. I failed at that, went to yeast, and then I mastered sourdough. So, but once I started making our own homemade bread, I just stopped buying it from the store. So that's that. Like I said, here in about an hour, I will be baking this, and I will show the finished product and all the directions, the actual recipe, like the full, so you know you can have a copy, or not copy, but a written direction. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Written directions will be in the description of this video. I know this was kind of lengthy, so I do apologize, but I wanted to go over as much as I could. And if I missed anything, or if anything was kind of confusing, feel free to message me, comment. If you follow me on Instagram, you can message me and I'll try to get back to it as soon as I can. So that's that. I really hope it helps anybody that is wanting a simpler way of making sourdough. And, you know, hopefully you can start making your own loaves. So, again, second rise for an hour, and we're going to bake. Okay? Okay, so my loaf is done. A couple things that I noticed that I did wrong. I should have let it rise longer, so it rose for about 4 hours. It truthfully needed about 8. It's still, I believe, going to be great. I'm not going to cut it until it cools, but this is the finished loaf. It didn't spring up as much as I hoped, but again, I think I didn't let it rise as much as I should. Still going to be good bread, but it should have rose a little bit longer. So this is it, and this is the finished product. Once it cools, I'll cut it and I'll enjoy it with my family.